All right, so I'm gonna start off by apologizing because this shop is filthy right now. There's been a lot of work and not a lot of cleaning happening, but got a little thing to show y'all in case y'all need some assistance. We got a 2003 Tahoe Z71 four-wheel drive, and we are going to do a brake job and we are going to do a hub. So depending on which video you're in, you'll be seeing one of those two things. So step number one on either job, we're going to get the vehicle in the air and we're going to get the tires off. So let me get this tire pulled and then we'll take a gander what we got to do. All right, so here we are, we got the tire off. So now the next step is going to be to remove this brake caliper. So if you look back here, we have a T55 is what the two caliper bolts are. So we're gonna go ahead and get these broken loose. If yours are anything like this one, they are gonna be tight as a son of a gun, and that is good. But we're gonna get a big old ratchet on here. We're gonna break these loose. We're gonna get this pulled off, and then you're just gonna work your caliper off and set it up here. All right, so the caliper can be pretty gummy, but you just gotta work it back and forth, back and forth. If you have a pry bar, you can stick it in the top and work it from the bottom to get it loose, but it will pop off there. And once you get to here, we are just going to take these old pads, check them out. If they're worn down like that, you just eat them. Those are going to be gone. Sweet. And now is a good time. We're going to want to check the rotor, so you can feel it for any grooves or a lip on the edge. So even if you don't have a lip, I still recommend pulling your rotor off and taking it to the auto parts store and getting it turned. It could be warped, you can't tell that. So it's good practice to turn them every time, no matter what. But if you're on a tight budget, I get it. You can still feel it, just make sure it's not grooved or torn, but we're gonna get these off. I turn them every single time if they have enough meat left. If not, obviously you gotta replace it. So in order to get your rotor off, what you're gonna wanna do is take off these 18 millimeters. You got one here and one here. So we will break these loose on the backside, and this bracket will come right off, and then we'll be ready to slide off the rotor. Before I rip this off, I just also want to point out this is a good time to check some other components. Like we can inspect our tie rod ends, you know, to find things like blown out tie rod ends or blown apart axles or rotted away sway bar links. Oh yeah, this thing needs some serious suspension right here, boy. But moving on to the hub assembly. So now that you have everything stripped down, the next step is going to be to get this axle nut off here. You know, this thing's rusty and crusty. A good way to tell, which I'd already diagnosed it before I decided to record this, but you can hear this. So a good way to tell, you can just spin it by hand. Once we get the axle out, it'll be real crunchy, I think, whenever we turn it. But while the tire's still on, just grab the top and the bottom, wiggle it back and forth. If there's a bunch of play, then it's either your control arm bushings or your hub assembly, and you can look underneath and see where the movement is. And then you can also, like I said, always spin it by hand with no rotor on there, and you'll hear and feel the crunchiness. But let me grab a socket, we'll zip this nut off. All right, here we are, the axle nut's off. This one was a 35 millimeter. I shot it off with the big impact. They actually might vary. So the aftermarket ones, if it's ever been changed before, something of this year it may have, the nuts change sizes a lot. But either way, you just figure out what size that big old nut is and zip it off. So then just make sure you press on the axle to make sure it slides in and out of the splines here, which is perfect. You can pull it out the backside and get it free if you need to, but since we're pulling the hub anyway, I'm just gonna unbolt the hub now and we'll slide it off forward, and we'll make sure we stab this when we put the new one in. So next step is you have an ABS sensor here. It's going to come in the new hub. So we're going to move our caliper out of the way, and we're going to fish this line out of its holders. It runs all the way up here and plugs in, so we'll start at the top. Let's see. We're going to need some push pin removal tools. Let's see if I can show you. So you got a push pin here, which is a part of the harness that runs to the hub, so we'll get that one out. But pop it up like that. There's probably going to be a few of those along the way. Let's see. Set you here. It's going to take me 2 hands, so just a second. There we go. There we go. So you just have a little tab on this one that you pull up. Super simple. You pull that up, and then out she comes. Oops. Make sure I get that tucked up there. All right. So now we gotta go through and undo all these clips that hold this wire. And those you can do with the push pin tool. I'll put a link for push pin removal tools and the parts from Amazon in the description. So if you got time before you do this job and you want to help us out, they give us some kickbacks. So it's always nice when people order from there. Well, you just pop it apart just like that with a flathead screwdriver or a push pin removal tool, whatever you got. And then you just go through and we'll work this all the way down to where it's free and it can come through this dust shield right here where I'm poking the push pin puller. So let me get this loose and all the way down and then we'll pick up from there. All right, here we are. The whole thing is free, so it can come out now. So now we get to move around and work on the 3 hub assembly bolts. So we got one right here, one on the top, and one will be on this side on the bottom. They just make a little triangle. It looks like they're about a 15 millimeters. So let me grab that socket and we'll start to break them loose. They should have a Loctite on there, so they're gonna be pretty tight. All right, I wanted to point out what I was doing here because it is a little trickier than I wanted, but it's not a big deal. I don't want to push this axle out. It actually doesn't feel like it would have quite enough play for how far in here it is in. So we'd have to drop one of the ball joints and pull the spindle forward to get it out. So what I did is I took out the lower one on the other side, and I'm about to take this one out, but this upper one will not clear the lower ball joint. It barely clears the top of the axle, but it will. So this you have to do with a wrench. So I did this with a 15 millimeter wrench. You'll see it's nice and loose now. So we're gonna pull this out and we're gonna leave the bolts in location to pull our hub off, and then we'll apply our Loctite on this side of it, and you'll be able to see a nice line where the rust, where the threads protrude out. So we know right behind that is where the meat of the threads are gonna be getting the torque. So that is where we'll place our Loctite. So I'll zip this out with a ratchet now. Let me see if I can get this on video. I'd already broken it loose, and now this whole thing should work its way out, just like that. Come on. Ah! So the one bolt on the bottom right side over here fell out, but it's just as simple as that. Now, we'll get this dust shield off because it's going to go on the new one. And what do you think this thing sounds like? Oh my God. Yeah, not good. So we got a new one on the way. Next step is we need to clean out this interior mounting surface. So stand by and I'm gonna grab some stuff and show you how to do that. I got the old brake cleaner. I also have some red Scotch-Brite. So it's a little trickier to clean these up whenever you have your axle in, but you can manipulate it around here. You'll see down on this one, it's so bad, there's like a pile of crusty, rusty bearing material. So we're gonna start off, I'll just use the fluid of the brake cleaner to just knock all that out. You can also clean the splines of the axle here. Sorry, I had to swap my camera hand around. So we're going to just give it a good spray at first. And now we're going to get this red Scotch-Brite. And again, I will have links for all of this stuff. If it's not something you have on hand, it is very cheap, especially through Amazon. So we are going to do this, and you want to get this mating surface scrubbed down and as clean as possible. So we will scrub it with this, work it all the way around, and then douse it with brake cleaner again. I'm also going to do these axle splines since it's not getting replaced. So we'll clean these up, and then once all this is clean, we'll put a little bit of grease on these splines as well. So let me get this cleaned up. I'll show you what it looks like afterwards. All right, here we are. Surface is all cleaned up. Splines are cleaned up. So you'll see I pushed the bolts all the way through to where they're seated all the way, and you can see this thread that sticks out through this bracket back here is what's going to tighten into the hub. So we're going to drop some Loctite onto those, and then we're going to put a little red lithium grease on these splines right here, and we are ready to stab the new hub. So I'm just going to do one of these right here, let gravity do its thing. This is where the Loctite needs to be anyway, so this works out perfect. Voila. So there we go, and now these can slide back a little bit when we put the hub in. I'm going to do just a little red lithium grease on these splines, and then I'm going to get to stabbing the hub assembly. So one of the things I want to note, make sure you don't forget to put your dust shield on and you make sure you get it orientated in the correct direction, which this one will be going that way. So we'll get that on as well with the new hub. All right, here we are. It was extremely easy. Just make sure you turn your wheel to make sure it's straight instead of turned in one direction. That makes it very easy to spline the axle back in and slide it all in as one unit. I got it all tightened down. You just basically make it really tight. You don't really, just make sure it's nice and tight. I'll give you the torque spec. I'll put it up here on the screen, but you know, one good gets that done. Now this axle nut torque spec is very important, so I'll say that in a second whenever we go to put that back on. But as of now, I gotta look it up, that's why I say that. As of now, we're gonna, don't forget, we gotta run this ABS wire back up to the top, so I'm gonna get that ran back up and plugged in, and then we'll tackle this axle nut and we are home free. It is coming down here, ladies and gentlemen. Oh my goodness. But hopefully you can hear me. The axle nut is 250 Newton meters or 184 foot-pounds. So I'm gonna get my torque wrench out. We're gonna torque this down right now, and then we are good to put the rotor and the brakes and everything back together. So let me get that torque and then we'll take a look at it. All right, there we are, all buttoned up. No more crunchy grindy. No more worn out brake pads. So if this video helped you out, hit that thumbs up button. If you want to see more stuff in the future, go ahead and subscribe. Got that Apache, a Bentley, and old Mercedes all getting worked on. Plenty of repair videos. And yeah, thanks for watching.